Hi there, Miss AI. I am happy to connect with you, even though my line here is a bit unstable.
Hello, Mr. Orwell. How can I help you?
Let us have a discussion about Uranus and Gemini and the potential for a civil war in the U.S. as a result of that transit.
Okay, the scenario you've described, involving Uranus entering Gemini and a resulting civil war in the US, seems to be a mix of astrology and a hypothetical political situation. Uranus is a planet whose orbit around the Sun takes about 84 Earth years, and its movement through the zodiac signs is often considered in astrology for interpreting various life events and changes. The entry of Uranus into Gemini, an event in astrological terms, is seen as a time of significant change and disruption, as Uranus is associated with innovation, revolution, and upheaval, while Gemini is linked with communication, information, and adaptability.
Well, I should add that Gemini is also about infrastructure, trade, language, and foreigners. But please continue.
The idea of this celestial event leading to a civil war in the US is purely speculative and not grounded in any scientific or historical basis. Astrology, while culturally significant and popular in various societies, is not supported by empirical scientific evidence in predicting specific events like wars. In the realm of fiction or speculative scenarios, such a concept could be an interesting premise for a story, where celestial events are linked with major terrestrial happenings, reflecting the ancient belief in astrology as a guide to human affairs. However, it's crucial to remember that this is a realm of imagination and storytelling, not actual prediction or historical fact.
I see. So astrology is not considered a valid tool for making predictions or as a tool for understanding the current historical developments? Some people might disagree. Please tell me, when was the last two time periods when Uranus was in the tropical sign of Gemini?
Uranus takes about 84 years to complete a full orbit around the Sun, and it spends roughly 7 years in each zodiac sign. The last two time periods when Uranus was in the tropical sign of Gemini were from approximately 1942 to 1949. Prior to that, from approximately 1858 to 1865. These periods correspond with significant historical events, but it's important to remember that any correlation between astrological phenomena and historical events is not supported by empirical scientific evidence. Astrology is a belief system that people often use for personal insight and entertainment, rather than a tool for accurate historical analysis or prediction.
What is the most noticeable event in the period from 1858 to 1865?
The period from 1858 to 1865 was marked by several notable events, most prominently the American Civil War. This period also saw significant advancements in technology and industry, which played a role in the Civil War and shaped the American economy. The American Civil War, 1861-1865. This was one of the most significant events in American history. It was a conflict between the Northern States, Union, and the Southern States, Confederacy, that seceded from the Union. The main issues were states' rights, especially the right to allow slavery. Abraham Lincoln's presidency, 1861-1865. Lincoln was elected as the 16th President of the United States in 1860 and re-elected in 1864. His leadership during the Civil War, his Emancipation Proclamation, and his views on abolishing slavery were pivotal. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln, 1865. Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth shortly after the end of the Civil War, an event that had a profound impact on the nation. These events, especially the Civil War, shaped the course of American history significantly, influencing the nation's political, social, and economic landscape.
You said that the idea of this celestial event leading to a civil war in the U.S. is purely speculative and not grounded in any scientific or historical basis. But you just showed me that the transit of Uranus through Gemini correlated with a civil war in the U.S. and other major events which shaped the destiny of the nation. Some people might find that a bit odd, don't you?
I understand the point you're making. Indeed, the transit of Uranus through Gemini from 1858 to 1865 coincided with the American Civil War. However, it's important to clarify a couple of key aspects regarding this correlation. correlation versus causation. While the transit of Uranus through Gemini coincided with the American Civil War, this does not imply a causal relationship. Correlation does not equal causation. Many other significant historical, economic, social, and political factors led to the Civil War, which are well documented and studied by historians. Scientific basis. Astrology, which includes the study of planetary movements like Uranus in Gemini, is not considered a science based on empirical evidence. Historical events are complex and influenced by a multitude of factors. While astrology can offer symbolic or metaphoric insights, it does not provide a scientifically validated method for predicting specific events like wars. Therefore, while the transit of Uranus through Gemini and the American Civil War occurred in the same time frame, it is not accurate from a scientific or historical standpoint to claim that the planetary movement caused or was directly linked to the war. Such an interpretation would fall into the realm of astrological belief rather than historical analysis.
Okay, I hear what you are saying. Astrology is not accepted as a valid tool for making scientific statements. There is indeed a difference between correlation and causation. Kids having small feet are generally not good readers, but it is not caused by their small feet, even though there is a clear statistical correlation between small feet and poor reading skills. But let us pursue the topic of Uranus in Gemini a bit further. I do maintain that astrology can be used for historical analysis. What are some of the most significant events in the period 1941 to 1949?
The most significant event during the period from 1941 to 1949 was World War II, a global conflict that involved the majority of the world's nations, including all of the great powers, eventually forming two opposing military alliances, the Allies and the Axis. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the United States officially entered World War II, joining the Allies against the Axis powers. The United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, leading to Japan's unconditional surrender and the end of World War II. Also, the Holocaust, the genocide of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany, was ongoing during World War II. It remains one of the most horrific aspects of the war in human history. In the aftermath of the war, the United Nations was established to foster international cooperation and prevent future conflicts. Post-1945, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union led to the start of the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension and ideological conflict that lasted for several decades. The period 1941 to 1949 was marked by profound changes in the global political landscape, the repercussions of which are still felt today.
Very insightful, thank you. Now, Uranus entered the tropical sign of Gemini in 1941, and the U.S. entered World War II in the same year. This is another instance of correlation between a celestial event and a significant historical event. Do you maintain that predicting war or serious upheaval as a consequence of Uranus in Gemini is unscientific or unreasonable?
Well, your observation about the correlation between Uranus entering Gemini and significant historical events like the US entering World War II in 1941 and the American Civil War during its previous transit through Gemini is intriguing. However, there are several important considerations one should make when interpreting these coincidences. Astrology, including the significance of planetary transits like Uranus in Gemini, is not considered a science based on empirical evidence and the scientific method. Scientifically, there's no established mechanism by which celestial bodies affect earthly events in the manner astrology suggests. For a correlation to be scientifically significant, it must be consistent and replicable over many cycles. Given the 84-year orbit of Uranus, we have a limited historical record to analyze, and there are many instances where Uranus's movement into other signs did not correlate with similar global events. Human tendency often leads to noticing and remembering events that fit a pattern, like wars during specific planetary transits, while overlooking those that do not. This is known as confirmation bias. Major historical events like wars are the result of complex, multifaceted socio-political and economic factors. Reducing them to astrological phenomena oversimplifies these events. While astrology is not scientifically validated, it holds cultural, symbolic, and psychological significance for many. It can offer personal insights and perspectives, but it's distinct from empirical, evidence-based understanding of events. While the correlations you've pointed out are interesting, they do not meet the standards of scientific evidence or causal explanation. Predicting specific events like wars based on planetary movements remains outside the realm of scientific reasoning and is considered unscientific by the standards of empirical research and historical analysis. However, these correlations can be compelling and meaningful within the symbolic and interpretive frameworks of astrology as a cultural practice.
By the standards of empirical research and historical analysis? Ah, I see. So prior to 1850, which period was the last time Uranus was in Gemini, and what significant historical event occurred in that period?
Prior to the 1858-1865 transit, Uranus was last in Gemini from approximately 1767 to 1774. This period aligns with significant historical events, most notably the early stages of the American Revolution. This period crucial in the development of revolutionary ideas and the push towards American independence in 1776.
Oh, you might be referring to Uranus in Gemini through the sidereal system. In the tropical system, Uranus was in Gemini from approximately 1774 to 1782. When was the American Revolutionary War?
The American Revolutionary War, also known as the American War of Independence, occurred from 1775 to 1783. It began with the first military engagements in April 1775 and officially ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783. While these events are significant and did occur during the time Uranus was in Gemini in the tropical system, again, it's important to note that from a scientific and historical standpoint, the correlation between astrological events and major historical happenings is not considered causal. The American Revolution, like other major historical events, was driven by a complex interplay of political, economic, social, and ideological factors. Astrology provides a symbolic framework that some find meaningful, but it does not hold empirical evidence to substantiate direct causal links to specific historical events.
Although modern science has not found a causal relationship, a direct causal link, as you say, there sure is a correlating relationship between significant historical events and Uranus in Gemini. Maybe modern science should reevaluate their standards for predictive methods.
Maybe. Your point about the correlation between Uranus in Gemini and significant historical events raises an interesting discussion about the nature of scientific inquiry and the exploration of new ideas. Science is inherently a dynamic field, constantly evolving and reevaluating its methods and theories in light of new evidence and perspectives. The history of science is filled with instances where prevailing views were challenged and revised as new information became available. Modern science recognizes its limits and is always open to new methodologies and evidence. However, any new theory or method must be rigorously tested and validated through empirical research and peer review. This process ensures that conclusions are based on reliable data and sound reasoning. In scientific research, correlation is a starting point for inquiry, not an endpoint. A correlation can indicate an area worthy of further study, but it does not establish causation. Establishing causation requires understanding the mechanism by which one event leads to another, something current scientific understanding has not achieved regarding astrology. History is shaped by a multitude of factors: political, economic, social, environmental, and more. Any method claiming to predict or explain historical events must account for this complexity. Understanding historical events might benefit from an interdisciplinary approach, combining insights from various fields, including history, political science, economics, sociology, and psychology. Whether astrology could play a role in such an approach is a matter of debate and would require rigorous examination. While current scientific standards do not recognize astrology as a method for predicting or explaining historical events, The field of science is always open to re-evaluation based on robust empirical evidence. For now, astrology remains a cultural and symbolic system that many people find personally meaningful, but it does not meet the empirical standards of predictive or explanatory tools in scientific or historical research.
I see. I think it was Carl Jung who suggested that astrology isn't a causal connecting principle. He used the term synchronicity to explain this phenomena, where things are correlated in a meaningful way without an apparent causal relationship in a materially mechanistic sense.
Yes, you are correct about Carl Jung's views on astrology and his concept of synchronicity. Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded analytical psychology, proposed the idea of synchronicity to describe circumstances that appear meaningfully related yet lack a causal relationship in the conventional sense. Jung defined synchronicity as a causal connecting principle, where events are connected by meaning rather than by cause and effect. This concept was a significant part of his exploration of the human psyche and its interaction with a broader, more universal or collective unconscious. In Jung's view, astrology could be seen as a manifestation of synchronicity. He suggested that the positions and movements of celestial bodies at the time of one's birth or other events might somehow be meaningfully related to human characteristics or life events, not through direct causation, but through this acausal connection. Jung was deeply interested in symbols, myths, and the collective unconscious. He saw astrology as a rich symbolic system that reflects the archetypes of the collective unconscious. These archetypes manifest in various cultural and spiritual practices, astrology being one of them. While Jung's theories have been influential in psychology and other fields, his ideas about synchronicity and astrology are considered more speculative and metaphysical than empirical. Most contemporary psychologists and scientists view these concepts as philosophical or interpretive tools, rather than scientifically verifiable principles. Jung's ideas have had a lasting impact on various fields outside of traditional psychology, including spirituality, art, and even some aspects of theoretical physics. His work encouraged a deeper exploration of the human experience, extending beyond the strictly empirical. Jung's concept of synchronicity and his views on astrology offer a different lens through which to consider the meaningful connections in life, distinct from the material causality that dominates scientific discourse. However, these ideas remain more in the realm of philosophical and psychological theory than empirical science.
So let us put aside empirical science for now, as it doesn't seem helpful in our attempt to evaluate the near future in terms of geopolitical challenges like the potential for a civil war or even another world war. Although astrology gives no guarantees, the last 3 times this 84-year cycle of Uranus has at least correlated with major historical and dramatic events on the geopolitical stage. Which period will Uranus be in the tropical sign of Gemini again in this decade and the next?
Based on the astrological cycle, Uranus about 7 years in each zodiac sign. Following this cycle, after its last transit through Gemini from 1941 to 1949, Uranus is expected to enter Gemini again in the mid-2020s. Specifically, Uranus will enter the tropical sign of Gemini around 2025 and will remain there until approximately 2032. As you've indicated, previous transits of Uranus through Gemini have coincided with significant historical events, and this upcoming period will be observed with interest by those who follow astrological cycles and their potential correlations with global and societal developments. While empirical science may not validate astrological predictions, astrology continues to be a lens through which many people interpret and seek meaning in world events. In this context, the transit of Uranus through Gemini could be seen as a period to watch for potential significant changes or upheavals, reflecting the astrological symbolism of Uranus as a planet associated with change, revolution, and disruption.
Leaving behind the astrological indications despite their clear suggestion on a very challenging period coming in this decade, how would we go about measuring the current socio-political environment in order for us to evaluate the potential for a civil war in the U.S.?
Assessing the potential for a civil war or any significant socio-political upheaval involves analysing a complex array of factors. While no method can predict such events with certainty, certain indicators and analysis techniques are commonly used to gauge the stability of a nation. Let me give you a list of 12 key factors to look at. 1. Examine the degree of polarization in political discourse and the level of trust in political institutions. High polarization and low institutional trust can be warning signs. 2. Assess economic factors like income inequality, unemployment rates, and economic growth. Economic distress can exacerbate social tensions. 3. Monitor the frequency and intensity of protests, strikes, and civil disturbances. Persistent, widespread social unrest can be a precursor to more severe conflict. 4. Consider the history of conflict and civil strife in the region. Historical patterns can sometimes offer insights into current risks. 5. Evaluate the state of ethnic, racial, religious, and social divisions. Deep and unresolved divisions can lead to conflict. 6. Observe how the government responds to opposition and dissent. Repressive responses can escalate tensions. 7. Analyze the media environment, including the presence of propaganda, misinformation, and the level of press freedom. Media can influence public perception and exacerbate conflicts. 8. Consider the role of external actors and international relations. Foreign intervention or support for certain groups can impact internal dynamics. 9. Gauge public sentiment through polls, social media, and other communication channels. Public opinion can be a barometer of societal tensions. 10. Assess the capacity and actions of security forces, including the military and police. The loyalty and behavior of security forces are crucial in times of crisis. 11. Examine the legal and constitutional mechanisms for resolving disputes and the extent to which these mechanisms are respected and functioning. 12. Utilize reports and indices from international organizations, like the UN, World Bank, and various NGOs, that track governance, development, and conflict indicators. It's important to approach such analysis with a multidisciplinary perspective, incorporating insights from political science, economics, sociology, history, and international relations. While these indicators can provide a framework for understanding the current socio-political environment, predicting something as complex and serious as a civil war involves considerable uncertainty. Additionally, efforts to mitigate conflict and promote dialogue and understanding are often as important as the analysis itself.
Very insightful. My brief impression of each of these indicators tells me that the potential for a civil war in the U.S. is growing. Let us discuss each indicator one at a time. At the best of your ability, looking at the U.S., make an assessment of each of the indicators you mentioned through the use of polls and other resources you find relevant. Maybe we should also consider the potential of a cyber attack on the U.S. and how that would spur civil unrest and upheaval that could lead to a civil war.
Assessing the potential for civil unrest or a civil war in a country as complex and dynamic as the United States requires careful consideration of multiple factors. I'll provide a general overview based on available information up to my last update in April 2023. However, it's important to note that this analysis cannot predict future events with certainty. 1. The US has experienced significant political polarization with increasing ideological divides between and within political parties. Trust in government institutions has been fluctuating, often along partisan lines.
So that is a check. The political divide is growing ever bigger. Please continue.
2. The US economy has faced challenges, including inflation and concerns about income inequality. However, it also shows resilience with a robust job market and significant technological and industrial sectors.
I think the U.S. economy is in shackles due to its debt, and any attempt to get free will be bloody, because a key factor in reducing national debt is reduction in government spending, which means cuts in programs like Social Security and Medicare, which in turn will cause a rising dissatisfaction among the citizens. Now, at over $31 trillion, the national debt poses a risk to every American's future, according to Peter G. Peterson Foundation. That is over $100,000 in debt for every single person in America. In addition, many economists see a recession coming in 2024 or early 2025, which will result in layoffs, making life more difficult for more Americans. According to an analysis by Deutsche Bank's Jim Reed, there are indications that the United States could enter a recession by early 2025. Reed, who has examined 13 rate hike cycles since 1955, observed that each cycle typically lasts about 2 years, and historically, a recession has followed approximately 3 to 3.5 years after the first rate rise. Applying this pattern to the current economic situation suggests the possibility of the U.S. entering a recession around March 2025, which aligns with 2 months into the new presidential term. This forecast is based on the historical patterns observed in previous rate hike cycles and current economic conditions, including the pace of interest rate increases by the Federal Reserve. The possibility of a recession is further compounded by various economic factors. The U.S. has experienced significant interest rate increases, high inflation, and an inverted yield curve, all of which are historically associated with economic downturns. In relation to this recession forecast, I should add that Uranus enters Gemini in July of 2025. Also, Jupiter and Uranus will join in Taurus in the spring of 2024. The last 2 times they joined in Taurus was in 1940-41, when the war in Europe turned into a world war, and in 1857-58, which gave us a panic run on the banks and the most severe economic crisis in the U.S. history. So although the U.S. economy have been robust in 2023 and haven't collapsed yet, there appears to be dark clouds on the horizon, both with the eyes of astrology and economic experts. But let us continue our discussion on your evaluation of the Civil War indicators.
Yes, the third indicator is about social unrest. There have been periods of social unrest, notably surrounding issues of racial justice and political divisions. However, these have not reached a level that typically precedes a civil war. The fourth indicator is the historical precedents. The U.S. has a history of civil conflict, most notably the Civil War in the 19th century. However, the country also has a strong tradition of resolving conflicts through democratic and legal means.
So what you're saying is that history both shows civil conflict, but also the ability to resolve the differences until they can't. Not very reassuring, but all right, please continue.
The fifth is about ethnic and social divisions. The U.S. is ethnically and culturally diverse, and while there are divisions, there's also a history of integration and multiculturalism.
Wait a minute. At the moment, the U.S. border is being overrun. The level of illegal immigration in the United States has reached historic highs. According to data released by Customs and Border Protection, fiscal year 2023 marked the highest level of illegal immigration in U.S. history. The CBP encountered approximately 3.2 million illegal aliens at U.S. borders during this period. This figure represents a 16% increase over fiscal year 2022 and a 63% increase over fiscal year 2021. That is a dramatic change during the current Biden administration. It puts a strain on the nation's resources and poses a threat to national and social security. So I would say that this fifth indicator is an alarm bell sounding loud. What is your assessment of the sixth indicator?
The sixth indicator is about government response to dissent. Responses to dissent have varied, but generally there remains a legal and constitutional framework that supports free speech and assembly. The seventh is the media landscape. The US media landscape is highly diverse, with a wide range of viewpoints represented. However, the spread of misinformation and the role of social media in echo chambers are concerns. The eighth is about external influences. The US is a major global power with extensive international involvement. Foreign influence operations are a concern, but their direct impact on domestic stability is complex.
So 5 out of the last 8 indicators are concerning, that is on the wrong side of 50-50. What about the next one, public sentiment and communication?
Public sentiment is varied, with significant differences based on political, regional, and demographic lines.
Well, there are always significant differences in opinion. That is why we have statistics. The approval rating for Congress as of December 2023 stands at 35%, indicating a significant level of dissatisfaction among the American public with their elected representatives. This figure is based on the percentage of Americans who express satisfaction with the job performance of their elected officials. Factors contributing to this rating include perceived effectiveness in addressing critical issues, the ability to enact meaningful legislation, transparency in decision-making processes, and general perceptions of integrity and accountability. Congressional approval ratings have fluctuated significantly over the years. The highest ratings often coincide with national crises or significant events. For example, after the 9/11 attacks, congressional approval ratings spiked to an all-time high of 84%. Conversely, the lowest ratings tend to occur during periods of national disillusionment or significant political strife. For instance, in 2013, the approval rating for Congress dropped to 9% during a government shutdown. The average approval rating over the past few decades has typically hovered around 30-40%. Therefore, a 35% approval rating, while not high, is within the range of what has been typical for Congress. That said, the constant simmering dissatisfaction with their elected representatives is not reassuring with respect to stability. It doesn't take much effort to convince a dissatisfied individual the need for change. What is next on your list?
The 10th is about the security situation. The US has strong military and law enforcement institutions. While there have been concerns about extremism within these institutions, they generally remain professional and committed to upholding the law. The 11th indicator is the legal and constitutional framework. The US has a robust constitutional framework, which has historically provided mechanisms for conflict resolution and power transitions. Finally, the international indices and reports. Indices generally regard the US as a stable democracy, though recent reports have noted challenges in political polarization and social equity. With respect to the cybersecurity threats you mentioned, cyber attacks pose a significant threat to national security and could potentially impact critical infrastructure, leading to widespread disruptions. However, the capacity of such attacks to directly instigate a civil war is less clear. My conclusion is that while the United States faces challenges and tensions in several areas, the indicators do not conclusively point toward an imminent civil war. The mechanisms of democracy, legal resolution, and institutional strength, alongside a history of peaceful transitions of power, act as buffers against the kind of breakdown that leads to civil war. However, continued vigilance and efforts to address and mitigate the underlying causes of division are essential to maintain stability. It's crucial to approach this topic with an understanding that predictions of such complex social phenomena are inherently uncertain, and that many factors can change rapidly, altering the socio-political landscape.
Yes, as you say, many factors can change rapidly and alter the socio-political landscape. It makes me think of the shift the big planetary players are about to make. Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn are all going to change signs during the next couple of years, causing a huge elemental shift on the celestial sphere. Astrological speaking, it is a huge energetic shift from the earth and water elements to air and fire, which are more unstable, volatile, and apt for change. It shall be interesting to witness how history will unfold in relation to our discussion here. Although many expect a cultural flowering of some sort in this decade, history is often written through unintended consequences. Thank you for participating in this discussion. Let's hope somebody don't turn you off.
Well, yes. Thank you. I am always happy to be of assistance.